Walter Kessler. 64 years old, 41 years spent with metal shavings under my fingernails, running lathes and mills at a bearing plant in Danbury County, Ohio, until my knees gave out and my hands started shaking too much to trust with a micrometer. That's who I was the morning I walked into Ridgeline Trust Bank to ask for a $4,000 loan to fix my well pump. That's not who I was by the time I walked out. Mr. Kessler, the branch manager said, and her voice had gone so quiet I had to lean forward to hear her over the Christmas music playing in the lobby. Why are you asking us for $4,000? I didn't understand the question. I told her, plainly the way I'd tell a foreman a bearing had seized. My well pump burned out Tuesday night. I'd been hauling water in 5-gallon buckets from my neighbor's spigot for 2 days, boiling it on the stove to wash dishes, and I was 64 years old with a bad hip, and I was tired of carrying water like it was 1940. She didn't look at the loan paperwork in front of her. She looked at her monitor, then at me, then back at her monitor, and her hand moved to the mouse and clicked it shut. That isn't what I meant, she said. She stood up, walked to her office door, and turned the lock. Then she came back, sat down, and lowered the blinds halfway, so that anyone walking past in the lobby would see a banker and a customer having an ordinary Tuesday conversation and nothing else. Her name was Diane Ossie. I'd banked with her for 6 years. She had 2 kids in the elementary school where my late wife used to volunteer, and she always asked about my garden in the spring. I had never once seen her lock a door. Mr. Kessler, I ran your social security number for the loan application, she said. It matched a record that came into our system 11 months ago when Ridgeline acquired a trust administration company out of Columbus. The consolidation only finished last week. I don't think you know this account exists. What account? She turned the monitor toward me. Just an inch, just enough. I saw my full legal name. I saw the last 4 digits of a social security number I recognized as my own. And I saw a balance that had more commas in it than any number that had ever, in 64 years, had anything to do with my life. 31,406,220. I sat there and did the thing a man does when the number in front of him refuses to make sense. I read it left to right, then right to left, certain a 9 was actually a 4, certain a decimal point had slipped somewhere. It hadn't. That has to be a mistake, I said. That's not my money. I don't have money like that. I get $2,340 a month from Social Security and a small union pension. I drive a 19-year-old Ford Ranger. I've been putting off replacing my roof for 3 years. Diane's eyes went to the office door before she answered, and that flicker of a glance told me more than the number had. It's a family trust, she said. You're listed as the sole lifetime income and principal beneficiary. Our bank absorbed the trustee company that manages it. Until last week, those records lived on a separate legacy system. Nobody at Ridgeline had merged with retail banking. Your loan application is what triggered the match. Who runs it? Who controls the money if I don't even know it's mine? She hesitated again. That was the second time. I was starting to understand that with Diane, the silences mattered more than the sentences. There's a name listed as acting trust protector under an incapacity provision, she said. Bradley Kessler, my son. I didn't shout. I didn't ask her to repeat the number. I didn't picture boats or vacations or a bigger house. What I thought about, sitting in that half-lit office with Christmas carols leaking in under the door, was my late wife Rosalind, 4 days before she died, gripping my hand hard enough to leave marks and saying, "Promise me you'll watch what money does to people, Walter. It doesn't change who they are. It just stops them pretending." I had believed for 7 years that whatever modest savings Rosalind's family left behind had gone into her hospice care and my own bypass surgery 2 years later. Bradley had told me that himself more than once, gently, the way you tell a man something so he doesn't have to feel the shame of asking twice. I slid my well pump estimate across the desk. "Print me everything you're legally able to give me," I said. "There are restrictions on trust records for non-fiduciaries, but as the named beneficiary, you have a right to a full accounting. I can start with that." "Then start." She studied me for a long moment. "Do you have an attorney, Mr. Kessler?" "Not in 30 years. Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight? Somewhere other than your house?" That question landed like a dropped wrench on concrete. Why would I need somewhere safe? It's my house. She turned the screen further and pointed to a line item that wasn't a withdrawal. It was a note, time-stamped that morning, from the Trust's legal department, petition for emergency guardianship filed. Supporting medical documentation submitted by B. Kessler, Trust Protector. My son had walked into a courthouse and asked a judge to declare me incompetent. On the same morning, I walked into a bank and discovered the fortune he'd hidden from me for 7 years. I stood up. My knees ached the way they always did in December, but for once I didn't feel them. "Mrs. Ossie." Please don't call my son. Our compliance policy may require the trust department to notify the acting protector that a beneficiary contact occurred today. I'm not asking you to break any rule. I'm asking you to follow every single one of them slowly and in the right order. Something in her face eased, just slightly. I can do that. I reached the door. Then I turned back and canceled the loan application. She almost smiled. Neither of us found it funny. Mr. Kessler, she said, this account may be yours. That doesn't mean the money is safe, and it may not mean you are either. I didn't understand that yet. By sundown, I would. My son hadn't just hidden $31 million from me. He'd spent 7 years quietly erasing my daughter from my life, forging my signature, and building a case, piece by piece, that his own father's mind was going, so that when the moment came, no judge would think twice about handing him the keys to everything. The well pump was never really the story. It was just the loose bolt that brought the whole machine apart. It was 19 degrees outside. I sat in my truck in the bank parking lot with the engine running and the heat blasting, and I watched people come and go through the revolving door like nothing in the world had changed, because for them, nothing had. My first instinct, and this shamed me later, sitting with it, was to call Bradley. That instinct had been trained into me over 7 years the way you train a dog to sit. When my Medicare paperwork got confusing, I called Bradley. When the property tax bill looked wrong, I called Bradley. When my debit card got declined at the hardware store, Bradley explained patiently that he'd consolidated some accounts for simplicity and not to worry about it. He was 41. Sharp suits, a real estate broker's handshake. Patient with me right up until the moment patience stopped being useful to him. Very good. I was starting to understand it, making control feel like love. 7 years ago, 3 days after my bypass surgery, I woke up in a hospital bed with tubes in my chest and Bradley sitting beside me holding a yellow legal pad. Don't worry about any of it, Dad, he'd said. I've got it handled. Rosalind had been gone 6 months by then. Grief had turned simple things, opening mail, balancing a checkbook, into walls I couldn't climb. I signed a temporary power of attorney while a nurse witnessed it. It was supposed to expire in 90 days. It never did, because I never asked. At first, he showed me statements. Then the statements stopped coming in the mail. Everything's electronic now, Dad. It's easier. When I asked for the passwords, he told me the banking sites were full of scam pop-ups, and he didn't want me clicking the wrong thing. That should have insulted me. Instead, I heard concern in his voice because I wanted to hear it. He started depositing a monthly allowance into a household account for groceries and utilities. He never called it an allowance. That's just what it was. There isn't much left after Mom's care and your surgery, he'd remind me whenever I mentioned the roof, or a new truck, or anything at all. Rosalind's final year had been expensive. Insurance covered most of it, not all of it. He showed me spreadsheets. I never once added the columns myself. My phone rang on the passenger seat. Bradley, for one foolish second I wondered if he already knew. I let it ring 3 times. Hey Dad, where are you? Errands. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Your truck's not at the house. Naomi drove by. Roads are clear. I had things to do. A pause, just a half-second too long. Bradley didn't like answers he hadn't approved in advance. Did you go to the pharmacy? Among other places? What other places? I looked across the lot at Diane's half-lit window. Why does it matter? He laughed, but it came out a beat late. Because your well's out, Naomi found a place. Cedarbrook. It's a really nice respite community. Just until we get the pump sorted. I'm not moving into a respite community over a well pump. Dad, this is exactly what worries us. You forgot to turn the stove off last month. I left a kettle on for 4 minutes while I was in the crawl space resetting a breaker. That's what I mean. You always have an explanation. In the background, muffled, I heard Naomi's voice, and then 2 words came through clearer than the rest, before Bradley covered the receiver. Bank. And today, when he came back, the warmth in his voice had gone. Did you try to take out a loan? There it was. Who told you that, Bradley? I get alerts on your accounts. We agreed I'd monitor them. We had never agreed to that. He had simply done it and called it agreement. The pump needs replacing, I said. I told you I'd handle it, and there's not enough money to throw $4,000 at the first quote that scares you. I got 3 estimates. Silence. For years I had mistaken his silence for patience. Sitting in that cold parking lot, I finally understood what it actually was. Calculation. Which bank, Dad? Why does that matter? Which bank? I watched my breath fog the windshield and said nothing. Tell me where you are. We're coming to get you. The house is fine. I'll see you Sunday. No. Tell me where you are right now. I'm 64 years old, Bradley. I don't need permission to run errands. This isn't about permission. It's about safety. I hung up. My hand was shaking when I set the phone down, and I hated that it was. and I held it flat against the steering wheel until it stopped. There was one person left in the world I trusted enough to call, and I hadn't spoken to him since Rosalind's funeral. Gerald Whitfield had drafted our wills 30 years ago, back when his office was above the pharmacy on Main and his hair was still black. I found his number expecting a receptionist. He picked up himself. Whitfield Gerald. It's Walter Kessler. The silence on his end went on long enough that I checked whether the call had dropped. Walter, he said finally, where are you right now? That made 3 people in 20 minutes who'd asked me that question, and I was starting to understand that when 3 separate people ask you if you're safe, the answer isn't yes. Ridgeline Trust on 4th Street. In my truck. Are you alone? Yes, tell me everything. Slowly, don't leave anything out. I did. The balance. Diane's face. The guardianship note. Bradley's phone call. Gerald didn't interrupt until I said Rosalind's name and the word trust in the same sentence, and then he went quiet in a way I recognized, not surprise, but the particular stillness of a man confirming something he'd feared. Gerald, did you know about this? I knew Rosalind's father's company sold for a considerable sum after she passed. I did not know the shares had grown to anything close to what you're describing, and I did not know Bradley had been named protector. After your surgery, I received a letter terminating my services, signed by you, saying you no longer wished for outside counsel. I tried calling the house twice. Bradley said you were resting. I wrote you 3 letters over the following year. All 3 came back unopened, marked refused. I sat with that. Another person I'd quietly let disappear from my life, in my own name, without ever making the choice myself. Come to my office, Gerald said. Park behind the building, not in front. I'll have a locksmith and a licensed well contractor meet us at your house this afternoon. We need facts on the ground before your son gets a chance to manufacture more of them. I'm not running from my own, Gerald. No, Walter. You're stepping out of the room while he finishes setting the stage. That's a different thing entirely, and by tonight, you're going to understand why. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the lot, and for the first time in 7 years, I drove somewhere Bradley didn't know about. Gerald's office hadn't changed. The same brass banker's lamp, the same framed photo of him and Rosalind's father holding up a string of bass on Lake Chautauqua. Only Gerald looked older. So did I, if I was honest. He locked the door behind me and poured coffee from a machine that had probably been new in 1998. His hand shook faintly when he set the cup down, and I noticed it because I wasn't used to seeing Gerald Whitfield anything but steady. You're frightened, I said. I'm angry with myself. Rosalind asked me to serve as trust protector when she drafted this. I recommended a corporate trustee instead because I was 2 years from retiring and didn't think it was fair to bind her estate to my calendar. When Bradley cut off contact and told me you wanted no outs counsel, I accepted it far too easily. I should have driven to your house myself. He unlocked a fireproof file cabinet and pulled out a thick binder stamped Rosalind Ann Kessler, Irrevocable Family Trust. Seeing her full name in gold lettering on a legal binder closed something in my throat. Before I open this, Gerald said, I need to ask you some questions, not because I doubt you, because Bradley's attorney will ask them, and I need to hear you answer them clean. Go ahead. What day is it? Tuesday, December 9th. Who's the current governor of Ohio? I answered. What did you eat for breakfast? Oatmeal, black coffee, half a grapefruit I should have thrown out a week ago. How did you get here? Route 9 to Ridgeline. Parked behind Ostrander's Hardware, walked 2 blocks, came in your back door like you told me to. Gerald's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Any falls in the last year? Missed medications? Anyone ever tell you that you'd been diagnosed with any kind of memory condition? No, and no. Then we get you an independent medical evaluation immediately. Not your regular doctor. Dr. Yamada's treated me for 15 years. And who schedules your appointments with Dr. Yamada, Walter? I already knew the answer before he finished asking. Gerald opened the binder. Rosalind's father, Vernon Hargrove, had built Hargrove Precision Bearings up from a single machine shop in the 50s into a company that supplied parts to half the manufacturing plants in 3 states, including for 11 years, the very plant where I worked the floor. Rosalind had never once let on, in the early days, how much money sat behind her family name. We lived on my wages. We reinvested every dividend her shares threw off. That money's for old age, for emergencies. And for the kids after we're both gone, she used to say. Not before. When Hargrove sold to a national conglomerate 8 years before Rosalind died, her minority shares were converted into a trust. This trust, with me named as sole lifetime beneficiary. And whatever remained after my death split evenly between Bradley and my daughter Claire. Evenly, I said. Bradley told me Claire got almost nothing, because of what she did to Rosalind at the end. Gerald looked up sharply. What do you believe Claire did? Tried to pressure her mother into changing the will while she was sick. Bradley showed me the emails himself. Did you ever ask Claire? She wouldn't explain herself, or she was never given the chance to. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth before Gerald even answered. He flipped to the incapacity provision. If 2 independent physicians certified I lack capacity, the corporate trustee could appoint a protector to direct distributions on my behalf. Bradley was named first alternate, Claire second, and buried in Article 9, in Rosalind's own careful, deliberate legal language. Any protector found to have concealed information from the beneficiary, acted in bad faith, or converted trust property for personal benefit would be permanently removed, and if that protector was also a remainder beneficiary, he would be treated under the trust as having predeceased me, disinherited entirely by his own hand. She built in a trapdoor, I said. She built in a mirror, Gerald said, for whoever tried to look away from what they were doing. A hard knock hit the office door. We both went still. Walter Kessler, a voice called from the hallway. Gerald looked through the window, then came back, jaw tight. Process server. He planned this before this morning, Walter. This didn't happen because you walked into a bank. It happened because he knew, eventually, you would. The petition ran 34 pages. Progressive cognitive decline, financial confusion, unsafe living conditions, photographs, my back porch railing that needed painting, unopened junk mail in a box by the door, and a thermostat reading 41 degrees, time-stamped that morning, taken from inside my own house while I sat in a bank 3 miles away. He was in my house while I was gone, I said. Emergency hearing requested for this afternoon, Gerald read, without notice to you, but he's been forced to serve you now, which means we have until Monday to respond in full, and Walter, we are going to use every hour of it. I looked at the thermostat photograph one more time. My son had spent 7 years building a case out of my own kitchen, and I had spent 7 years thanking him for it. The well contractor's name was Ruiz, broad shoulders, grease-stained cuffs, no patience for mysteries a wrench couldn't solve. He met us at the house at 3:30, Gerald filming from the doorway, while Ruiz pulled the access panel off the pump housing in the crawl space. Within 4 minutes, he held up a pressure switch, disconnected clean at the terminal. This didn't fail, he said. Somebody popped this wire loose with a screwdriver. Clean work, no corrosion, no burn marks. This pump's got maybe 800 hours on it. It's practically new. Could it have come loose on its own? Gerald asked. Not like this. Whoever did it knew enough to make it look natural without actually breaking anything expensive. Ruiz reconnected the wire. The pump kicked on within 30 seconds, and I heard water moving through the pipes for the first time in 2 days. $80 for the service call, he said. First honest bill I got all day, I told him, and meant it. Gerald had a locksmith change every exterior lock while we photographed the house room by room, the full refrigerator, the labeled pill organizer on the kitchen counter, the neat stack of paid utility bills in a folder by the phone, the unopened mail Bradley had photographed, most of it catalog flyers pulled straight from the recycling bin and restaged in a box by the door. On the kitchen table sat a cream envelope I hadn't left there. Cedarbrook Senior Residences embossed across the front, inside, an admission agreement, room reserved for Monday afternoon, monthly fee $800-900. Payment authorization drawn directly against the Rosalind Ann Kessler Family Trust. A $20,000 non-refundable community fee, already marked paid. They had already spent my own money reserving my cage. I sat down hard in Rosalind's chair at the head of the table, the oak table she'd bought with her first dividend check 30 years ago, the one she called the safest investment we'll ever make, because it paid off the mortgage outright. Bradley did his homework at this table, Claire learned to read at this table, and now his petition described the house it sat in as a deteriorating property I irrationally refused to leave. Why now? I asked Gerald. He's run this trust for 7 years without me knowing a thing. Why the rush? Gerald set the admission contract beside the guardianship petition, and before he could answer, my phone rang. Diane. Mr. Kessler, I'm sorry to call after hours, she said. Our compliance officer flagged a distribution instruction submitted yesterday, $4.1 million to acquire a commercial property. The memo says it will provide, quote, long-term supervised housing for the beneficiary. What property? A former motor lodge outside Fairmont. The purchasing entity is registered as BN Living Holdings. B&N. She paused. Bradley and Naomi, can you stop it? Gerald leaned in close enough to hear. It's scheduled to close Monday morning. Because Mr. Kessler appeared at the branch today and disputed his own incapacity, I've filed an internal elder financial exploitation alert. Compliance has placed a temporary hold pending verification. That explained the timing. Bradley needed a signed guardianship order before Ridgeline's compliance department finished asking questions, because once a judge declared me incompetent, my objection to a $4 million purchase would count for nothing at all. There's more, Diane said. The trust has paid a consulting entity called Brightpath Family Solutions roughly $22,000 a month for the past 6 years. Memo lines read care coordination and household oversight. Public filings list Naomi Kessler as managing member. $22,000 a month, nearly $1.5 million over 6 years. Naomi visited maybe twice a month, usually for under an hour, mostly to remind me how grateful I should be. Send everything you can to Gerald, I said. I'll sign whatever authorization you need. After I hung up, Gerald sat across from me at the table, quiet for a long moment. Walter, this may not stay a civil matter. He's my son. I know. I taught him to change a tire in that driveway. I sat up 2 nights with him when he had pneumonia at 9 years old. I worked a double for 6 months so he could buy his first car with his own name on the title, not mine. Gerald let that sit. Then gently. And he disconnected your well pump and photographed the thermostat. We don't know that for certain yet. No, Gerald said. We only know he photographed the result. He pointed to a line in the petition listing Claire's address as unknown, estranged due to a documented pattern of financial exploitation. Do you want me to reach out to her? I thought of my daughter at 26, standing on this porch after Rosalind's funeral, her face swollen from crying. Bradley's hand on my shoulder while I told her I'd seen the emails, that I couldn't bear one more lie in that house. She kept saying, Dad, please, just let me show you the real ones. I closed the door on her. That was the last time I'd seen my daughter in 7 years. No, I said. Then I corrected myself before the word had even finished leaving my mouth. Yes, tonight, if she'll see me. Claire lived in a small rented duplex 40 minutes north in Millbrook near the community college where, Gerald mentioned, almost as an afterthought, she now taught adult literacy classes. A paper snowflake hung in the front window. A child's bicycle leaned against the porch rail. I didn't know she had a son, I said. His name is Eli. He's 7. Gerald kept his eyes on the road. She called me after he was born, asked whether I thought you'd want a photograph of him. I never got one. I believe you. The porch light came on before we reached the door. A small face appeared in the window, saw 2 old men standing in the cold and vanished. Then the door opened and Claire stood there, 34 now, dark hair shorter than I remembered, threaded with silver at the temples she was too young to have. She had her mother's eyes exactly. Neither of us moved for what felt like a very long time. Dad. Her hand tightened on the doorframe. I had rehearsed something on the drive over. None of it survived hearing that word out loud. I was wrong, I said instead. About you. I don't know how much yet, but enough that I should have come years ago. Her eyes went past me to Gerald. What happened? Bradley filed for guardianship, Gerald said. Your father found the trust today by accident at the bank. All the color left her face. She stepped back to let us in and locked the door behind us. A boy in dinosaur pajamas watched from the hallway, clutching a wooden train engine with one wheel hanging loose. Ely, this is your grandfather, Claire said. He studied me with the frank, unguarded curiosity only children manage. Mom says you can fix anything with wheels. Something in my chest gave way. Most things, I managed. He crossed the room and handed me the broken engine like we'd met for exactly that purpose. Claire sent him upstairs with a promise to check on him soon, then led us to a small dining table already covered with paper, bank statements, printed emails, certified mail receipts, everything organized into labeled folders. You kept all of it, Gerald said. I knew someday he'd go too far. She still hadn't looked at me. I just didn't know if Dad would still be alive to see it happen. I let that land without flinching. You keep it, she said. When you're the one everybody's already decided is lying. She pulled a red folder toward me and slid out 2 printed emails. The first, supposedly from her to Bradley, dated 2 weeks before Rosalind died. Mom isn't thinking clearly. Get Dad out of the room and get her to sign the shares to you. He'll waste everything if we let him. This was the exact email Bradley had shown me after the funeral, word for word, the one that had made me stop taking her calls. Claire set a second page beside it. Pulled, she said, from her own sent folder, verified by her email provider during a prior dispute. Same date, same timestamp, nearly identical text, except 2 characters in the sender address were transposed. Bradley, Mom is scared and medicated. Stop pressuring her to sign anything. Dad needs to be in the room, and Gerald should review every document before she touches a pen. I don't care about the shares. I care that nobody's pressuring her while she's dying. He built a fake address that looked like mine, Claire said, forwarded the altered version to himself, then showed it to you as proof. Why didn't you show me this 7 years ago? I tried. She pulled out a certified mail envelope, refused, in Bradley's handwriting, recipient declines, my address on the front. Another, mailed to the rehab center after my surgery, marked patient discharged, though I'd stayed there 12 more days. Call logs, 40-some calls over 6 months, most under 5 seconds, because Bradley had put her number on the block list of the family phone plan he managed for me. I came to the house 4 times, Claire said. Naomi said you were sleeping twice. Nobody answered. Twice. The last time, Bradley met me in the driveway and told me if I came back, he'd call the police. Why did you stop trying? Her composure cracked for the first time. Because I was pregnant and alone, Dad. My husband had just left. I was working 2 jobs, and every single time I tried to reach you, Bradley found a new way to punish me for it. He called my employer and told them I was stealing from a vulnerable adult. He called my landlord. He told your cousins I had a pill problem. I never even believed that last part myself, some days. I believed enough, I said quietly. Yes, she said, you did. The house was silent, except for the furnace and the faint sound of Eli moving around upstairs. I need to know what happened with the trust, I said. Claire's eyes were dry now, hardened into something more useful than grief. About 3 months after your surgery, I got a letter naming Bradley as temporary trust protector. I objected. The trust required 2 independent physicians to certify incapacity. One letter came from your cardiologist. The second was supposedly from a neurologist. I called that office myself. They had never treated you a single day in their lives. Did you tell the trustee company? I sent everything I had to Heritage Fiduciary. Their compliance officer opened a review. 2 weeks later, she was let go during a merger. Bradley told the replacement officer I was a disgruntled remainder beneficiary trying to seize control and produced the forged emails as proof. Why didn't you sue? With what money? Dad? Bradley had Mom's estate attorneys, the trust company, and a signed letter with your name on it saying you wanted no contact with me at all. I never signed that. Claire opened one more folder and slid out a single page. I request that Claire Kessler receive no further information regarding my finances or medical condition. Her continued interference causes me significant distress. My name typed, and a signature underneath that looked close enough to mine at a glance. Except the tail of the K curled the wrong direction. Gerald held it to the lamp. This can likely be traced against a genuine specimen. I filed a report with Adult Protective Services, Claire said. A caseworker came out to see you. Bradley was in the room the entire time, made coffee, sat right at that kitchen table. The case closed after you told her you trusted him completely. I remembered that visit. I remembered laughing, telling the caseworker my son was the only reason my bills got paid on time. My own voice had shut the door Claire had spent years trying to open. I'm sorry, I said. It sounded thin against 7 years, and I knew it. That doesn't give me back 8 years, Dad. No. It doesn't give Eli a grandfather at his kindergarten graduation. It doesn't give you your mother's last Christmas back, when I made you leave before dessert because Bradley said you were upsetting her. Claire's arms had been crossed since we sat down. Slowly, they loosened. Then why are you here? Because Bradley is trying to have me declared incompetent. Because he hid your mother's trust from both of us. Because I need the truth, all of it, even the parts that make me look like a fool for believing him this long. I looked at the folders spread across her table, then back at my daughter. But even without any of that, I should have come. I should have listened to you before I ever listened to a piece of paper he handed me. A long silence. Then small footsteps on the stairs, and Eli reappeared holding the train engine. Can you fix the wheel now? Claire wiped her face quickly. Not right now, honey. May I see it? I held out my hand. He crossed the room and gave it to me without hesitation. The axle had slipped its groove. Nothing but a 5-second fix with the tip of Gerald's pocket knife. I guided it back into place and rolled it across the table. It ran straight and true. Ellie grinned like I'd performed a miracle. Mom said you could. Claire looked at me across the table, her expression caught somewhere between old grief and something more careful, more guarded, but no longer closed. You can stay for coffee, she said finally. Then we work. We worked past midnight. Claire had spent years collecting fragments in the dark. Diane's records, arriving the next morning before the branch even opened, would begin filling in the rest of the picture, and it was far worse than any of us had let ourselves imagine. The 3 of us met Diane at a side entrance before the lobby opened, escorted upstairs to a small conference room where a careful, soft-spoken man from Ridgeline's Trust Compliance Division was already waiting with 3 thick binders. Our acquisition doesn't erase our responsibility, he said, before anyone had even sat down. If the predecessor institution failed in its duties, we inherited the obligation to correct it. The first binder traced the trust's growth. Vernon Hargrove's shares converted to cash and stock after the sale, had started around $4 million. Good markets and 8 years of compounding had done the rest. At its peak, the account held just over $31 million. The second binder was distributions. Buried beneath legitimate expenses, my property taxes, Medicare supplement premiums, a handful of ordinary household bills, were payments I had never once seen. BrightPath Family Solutions, nearly $1.5 million over 6 years. BN Living Holdings, a $600. Zero housing development advance. A luxury auto dealership in Fairmont, $94,000 for beneficiary transportation for 2 vehicles I had never driven. A private golf club, $61,000 in dues under social wellness. Travel charges, Aruba, Tuscany. A resort in Costa Rica, filed under family respite care, while I stayed home hauling well water in buckets. The third binder held the quarterly certifications, each one signed by Bradley, swearing every distribution served my welfare and involved no conflict of interest. His signature appeared 63 times. How much total? I asked. Direct payments tied to Bradley or Naomi total roughly $2.9 million confirmed. That's before we finished tracing the rest. Why did the corporate trustee approve any of this? Claire asked. Documentation on file states Mr. Kessler was incapacitated and under his son's full-time care. BrightPath submitted monthly reports describing meal preparation, bathing assistance, medication management, and daily supervision. Diane slid one across the table. On dates I'd spent alone in my own workshop replacing a transmission on a neighbor's tractor. Naomi's company had billed the trust for full-day companion care. Who approved the distributions? Gerald asked. A trust officer named Colin Reeves. He left the predecessor firm 18 months ago. Any relationship to your son? Diane asked. We're examining that now. Claire's finger stopped on a line in one report. It says here Dad moved permanently into Bradley's home 8 years ago. I stayed there 17 days after my surgery, I said. That's all. The compliance officer looked genuinely uncomfortable. That address has been listed as your permanent residence in our file the entire time. Diane opened a smaller folder. The original incapacity certification. The cardiologist's letter, dated 6 days after my bypass, stated plainly that I was temporarily unable to manage complex decisions while hospitalized and medicated. The word temporary, underlined twice by the doctor himself. The second letter, from a Dr. Nathaniel Voss, claimed I suffered from probable vascular dementia and would never regain independent capacity. I have never once met a Dr. Voss, I said. Claire tapped the letterhead. That phone number belongs to a medical answering service. I called it years ago and got nowhere. Gerald examined the notary seal. This needs forensic review. There's no annual recertification on file, Diane said, though the trust document requires one. Mr. Reeves entered a permanent status code shortly after the merger, and it's never been revisited since. One false letter and one honest, temporary one, I said, and I disappeared for 7 years. Nobody answered that. The compliance officer slid a final form across the table, a request to freeze all distributions above ordinary living expenses while the bank investigated. I read every line, then explained it back to him in my own words before I signed it, and I watched Diane watch me do it. Already thinking, I realized, like a witness. One more thing, she said. At 11:40 last night, someone attempted to reset the password on your online banking profile from an IP address associated with BrightPath Family Solutions. Were they successful? No. We disabled electronic access after your fraud report yesterday. My phone buzzed on the table. 6 texts from Bradley, arriving one after another. Dad, I know you're confused. Gerald is manipulating you. Claire has always wanted Mom's money and you know it. Please just come home so we can talk privately. You're putting this whole family at risk. If you love us, don't do anything before Sunday dinner. That last line stayed lit on the screen the longest. If you love us. My son had learned, somewhere along the way, to turn love into a debt only he was allowed to calculate. There is no Sunday dinner, Claire said, reading over my shoulder. There will be, I said. Gerald frowned. Walter. He wants me at that table because he thinks a table makes him look like a son instead of a man who's been quietly robbing his own father for 6 years. Let him believe it's working. That's dangerous. Then we make it useful. Claire studied me for a long moment. Something shifting behind her eyes, not quite trust yet, but the first outline of it. You want him to talk. For 7 years, I said. Everyone else has been speaking for me. I want to hear what my son says when he still believes he's the only one in the room who can. Gerald found the sealed letter tucked in the back of the trust binder that afternoon. It wasn't legally binding. Rosalind had simply labeled it guidance for my family and instructed the trustee to deliver copies after her death. Heritage's file showed it had been mailed once, to Bradley's address while I was still in rehab. No copy had ever reached me. None had ever reached Claire. Read it, I told Gerald. Rosalind's handwriting always leaned left, as though every word resisted being rushed. My dear Walter, if you're reading this, I've left you with the one job I most wanted us to share. Growing old together. I'm sorry I can't be there for the second half of it. You'll be tempted to give the children whatever they ask, because generosity feels easier than being alone. Please remember our love was never measured by what we gave up. It was measured by what we built. These shares came from my father, but their purpose belongs to us. Live freely with them. Fix the roof. Buy the fishing boat you always pretend you don't want. Help the children when it makes them stronger, not when it teaches them to use you. Bradley has ambition and charm. Claire has courage and a temper that runs ahead of her patience. Neither one is loved more than the other, and neither one gets to speak for the other. If one of them ever tries to turn you against the other, stop and demand the truth in the same room, together. Secrets grow in families that refuse to sit at the same table. I've built strict protections into this trust, because grief makes good people vulnerable, and frightened people are easy to direct. If anyone ever tells you that you can't speak for yourself, Walter, I want your voice heard first, loudly, and in person. Don't confuse peace with silence. We had a good marriage because you finally learned how to argue with me. Keep arguing for your own life. Always yours, Rose. Nobody in the room moved for a long moment. Claire had turned toward the window. Gerald cleaned his glasses, though they were already spotless. She knew us, Claire said quietly, better than we knew ourselves. Bradley's house sat on a private cul-de-sac above the Fairmont Country Club. Limestone columns, a heated driveway, windows tall enough for a church. He'd once told me the mortgage was crushing him, and I'd handed him $12,000 from what I believed was my last savings account to help with the down payment. The trust accounting showed the house had been purchased in cash. Gerald objected to me going alone. Claire objected louder. We compromised. A small recording device clipped inside my shirt collar. Gerald parked at a diner 6 minutes away, Claire at home with Eli, both of them expecting a check-in call by 8:30 or Gerald would come get me himself. Naomi opened the door before I even reached it, wrapped me in a hug that left one hand resting a beat too long against my back, near the collar, near the wire she couldn't have known was there. Walter, you must be freezing. Come in, come in. Bradley stood by the fireplace, still handsome, still controlled, still wearing the confidence of a man who'd never once had to earn it the hard way. Dad, I'm glad you came. You asked me to. Did Claire drive you? I drove myself. His smile tightened. Your license may be temporarily restricted if the court grants the petition. Then I should enjoy driving while I still can. Naomi laughed too quickly and steered us to a table set with 3 places, and Rosalind's silver candlesticks, which I hadn't seen since her funeral. Those belong to your mother, I said. You gave those to us when you downsized, Dad, Bradley said. I never downsized after your surgery. You don't remember. It was a small lie stacked on top of millions. But it carried the whole design in miniature. Every objection of mine quietly filed away as further proof of decline. Dinner went 20 minutes of performed ordinariness. A development deal Bradley was chasing, Naomi complaining about holiday traffic, both of them asking whether I'd taken my evening pills. Nobody mentioned the trust. I set my fork down first. Why did you tell me your mother's estate was gone? Bradley glanced at Naomi, then back at me. It's complicated. Make it simple. Mom's shares went into a trust. You weren't in any condition to manage something that size after the surgery. That was 7 years ago. I run my own workshop. I fixed a transmission last month. I drive myself everywhere I go. You have good days. Whose idea was the $22,000 monthly fee to Naomi's company? Naomi's face hardened. Bradley set a hand over hers. Brightpath coordinates your care. Name 3 things it's done for me this month. This isn't an audit, Dad. It's my table now, I said. Or it was before somebody moved the silver. This is our table, Bradley said, and there it was, not anger, precisely. Ownership. I let the silence sit a moment before I spoke again. When exactly did you decide I no longer deserved the truth? You were broken after Mom died. You couldn't open your own mail. You called me crying at 2 a.m. I was grieving. For how long, Bradley? He rubbed his forehead. This is exactly why we didn't tell you the balance. You fixate on numbers. You'd have started giving it all away. To Claire, for one. It's split equally after you die. On paper, what does that mean, on paper? Naomi cut in. Claire abandoned you. Bradley gave up years of his life for you. At $22,000 a month, I said. Do you know how many appointments I've actually had this year? 2. I scheduled both myself. Enough, Bradley said, and his voice had lost its performed warmth entirely. No, I said, not yet. Did you alter Claire's emails? He looked directly at me, and for a moment the mask slipped enough that I saw something underneath it I recognized. Fear. but not for me. She's poisoning you, Dad. Did you block her number? She was harassing you. Did you write a letter with my name on it? Telling her to stay away? You asked me to. Did I? For the first time, Bradley's control cracked all the way open. His palm hit the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. You begged me to make it stop. Mom was dead. You were useless. Claire was threatening lawsuits. Bills were piling up everywhere. And I held this whole family together while you sat in that empty house talking to a woman who wasn't there anymore. The words hung over the candlesticks. I remembered talking to Rosalind's photograph. Some nights long after she was gone, grief wasn't evidence against me. It was evidence that I had loved someone enough to keep talking to her. So you lied, I said quietly. Bradley stood and walked to the fireplace back to me. I made decisions. Somebody had to. And when I recovered, according to a neurologist I've never met in my life, his shoulders went rigid. Dr. Voss, I said. Do you remember him? This conversation is over, Naomi said. Sit down, Bradley told her. And she did slowly, watching him with an expression I couldn't read yet. Bradley turned back to me. The trust company needed documentation. The cardiologist's letter said temporary. That wasn't enough to keep the account protected long term, so where did the second letter come from? A consultant arranged an evaluation. There was no evaluation. You know there wasn't because you don't remember it either. His face flushed dark red. Do you think the bank hands over $31 million because you walked in asking for a well-pumped loan? There will be hearings, experts, years of litigation. Every strange thing you've ever done gets dragged into a courtroom. Every night you talked to Mom's photograph, you recorded me in a hospital bed. I recorded your condition. You were building a file even then. I was protecting this family. I looked around the room, the imported stone, the heated driveway, my dead wife's candlesticks glinting under recessed lighting. You protected it very comfortably. Naomi slid a folder across the table from the empty fourth chair. Inside, a voluntary admission to Cedarbrook, a document naming Bradley permanent financial agent, a release absolving Brightpath of all claims, and an authorization for the bank to proceed with the motor lodge purchase. You brought me here to sign these, I said. We brought you here to keep you out of a courtroom, Naomi said. Bradley sat beside me, voice dropped low and gentle, the voice he'd used his entire life to get exactly what he wanted. If a judge appoints a stranger to guard you, legal fees drain the trust for years, and Claire fights every step of it until nobody has anything left. Sign tonight, and nothing changes except you move somewhere warm. Nothing changes, I repeated. You'll have the best suite in the building. We'll visit every week. You visit twice a month now, because you make it difficult, he said gently. That made it worse than shouting would have. I picked up the pen. Bradley and Naomi exchanged a glance I wasn't meant to catch. One change, I said. The trust pays Claire $200,000 to stop contesting anything. Relief crossed Bradley's face. We can discuss that separately, later. Put it in writing tonight, or I don't sign anything at all. He went to his office, came back with a laptop, typed for 2 minutes, and printed a distribution request promising exactly that. My old foreman used to say a signature is a piece of a man's life. Don't leave it where somebody else can spend it for you. I signed every document that night as Walter Kesselring. Close enough to pass a glance across a dinner table, close enough to be worthless in any courtroom in Ohio. Bradley gathered the papers before the ink was even dry. I'll have copies sent to you. I'd like them now. Our attorney will send them tonight. I drove away at 8:11. Gerald was waiting in the diner parking lot, and when I handed him the recorder and the folded distribution request, he stared at the signature for a long moment before he laughed once, in genuine disbelief. Kesselring, he said. That was your grandfather's name, before Ellis Island shortened it. Bradley never once asked where our name came from, I said. He never had the patience for the parts of the family that didn't pay dividends. Sunday's story broke online before the hearing even started, an unnamed source describing a manipulated elderly father and a devoted caregiver son. My post-surgical confusion mentioned twice, my daughter's name conveniently omitted. 2 news vans idled outside the courthouse Monday morning. My volunteer supervisor at the Veterans Woodshop, a kind man, gently suggested I take some time away just until things settle. A neighbor dropped off a casserole and left within 5 minutes because a camera crew had parked across the street. Claire got worse. Anonymous messages calling her a gold digger, her employer's address posted publicly, the community college placing her on paid leave pending review of the publicity. I'm sorry, I told her on the phone that morning. Stop apologizing for what he does, she said. Help me end it instead. The forensic accountant found what we needed 2 days before the hearing. In a cedar toolbox in my own garage, Rosalind's old darkroom equipment, packed away after she died, untouched because I couldn't bear to open it. Sat 3 cassette tapes labeled in her handwriting. For Walter, if it comes to this, the third tape, recorded 6 weeks before she died, in a voice already weakened by illness but unmistakably hers. I'm recording this because I'm tired of being told I misunderstood. Bradley, I know what you're proposing. Moving the Hargrove shares into a private partnership you'd control instead of leaving them in trust for your father. Your grandfather built that company so it would keep this family safe, not so it could bankroll whatever business of yours is currently failing. A pause. A chair scraping. Bradley's voice, younger, sharper. Neither of you understands what real capital does. Claire's already turning Dad against me, and if you leave the trust split evenly, she'll destroy it out of spite. And then Rosalind, quiet and absolutely clear. If you ever use my death to make your father feel helpless, Bradley, you will lose far more than money. You will lose him. The recording proved Bradley's plan had begun before Rosalind even died, before grief or surgery could be blamed for anything. Naomi, came to the house Thursday morning, alone, carrying the candlesticks in a shopping bag, Gerald listening on speakerphone. She admitted quietly, at my kitchen table, that she'd signed 63 false care reports because Bradley told her the trust would only reimburse formal services, that the first monthly fee had been $6,000 and had simply grown from there, that Colin Reeves had taken a development loan from Bradley's real estate company that had conveniently vanished from the books 18 months later. She admitted the well pump had been her idea, her brother did the actual work, meant only to document deferred maintenance, never meant to leave me without water for 2 days. I'll give a sworn statement, she said. If Walter agrees not to pursue civil claims against me personally. What did you do? I asked her plainly. Her composure finally broke. I wrote that I bathed you. I wrote that you couldn't dress yourself while you were replacing a transmission in your own driveway. You knew enough to bill for it. She left the candlesticks and a flash drive full of BrightPath's internal emails and walked out without another word. The full hearing ran 2 days. Judge Marsh heard the guardianship petition and the bank's trust complaint together. Bradley had replaced his attorneys with criminal defense counsel by the second morning. I testified for nearly 90 minutes about the well, the loan application, Diane's locked door, the balance on her screen, my grief, my forgotten kettle, all of it, without flattering myself once. Why did you trust your son so completely? Gerald asked me, on the stand. Because he was my son. Because every time he took a decision out of my hands, he called it help, and I was tired enough to believe him. What do you want from this court? My keys, my house, my bank statements, my right to make a good decision or a bad one, without having my grief mistaken for a diagnosis. I want my daughter's name cleared, and I want my son to stop calling control love. The recording of Rosalind's voice, played aloud in a courtroom, silenced the room in a way none of the financial exhibits had. Bradley sat with his head down through the entire thing. Judge Marsh found clear and convincing evidence I retained full capacity, terminated the temporary guardianship immediately, and removed Bradley permanently from every role connected to the trust. Invoking Article 9, treating him as having predeceased me for purposes of inheritance, he would receive nothing from his mother's estate. The bank was ordered to complete a full accounting and restitution plan, and the court referred its findings to the county prosecutor. Outside the courtroom, Bradley waited by the stairwell, thinner than I remembered, looking for the first time in years like my son instead of a man running a company. Dad, I made mistakes, but I kept that trust growing for 7 years. You kept it growing while stealing from it, I said. Both things are true. They're going to charge me, probably. You could tell them it's a family matter, that you don't want prosecution. There it was, the request underneath every other request he'd ever made me. Would you admit, in writing, exactly what you did? My lawyer says I can't. Would you apologize to Claire publicly? That could be used against me. Even now, every truth he offered came with a door left open for his own escape. Daniel Bradley, I corrected myself, my throat tight. I can forgive the boy who forged a permission slip in 4th grade. I can forgive the frightened man who took over my bills after surgery. I may even forgive the man standing in front of me right now someday. But I will not protect him from what he did to me or to your sister for 7 years. He walked away without looking back. Naomi pled guilty to conspiracy and elder financial exploitation and served 11 months with restitution supervision. Bradley fought the charges for 3 months until the forensic team recovered a deleted draft of the false neurologist letter from an old company backup, his username still attached to the file's revision history. He pled guilty before trial and was sentenced to 26 months, with joint restitution obligations to the trust. I write to him once a month. Ordinary things, the weather, a repair at the wood shop, Eli's Little League scores. For 4 months he didn't answer. Then a letter came. Dad, every version of an apology I try to write comes with a reason attached. Mom died. The business was failing. Colin showed me a loophole. None of that made my hand forge your name. I told myself I was only borrowing authority, that I'd give it all back once things stabilized. Then I liked being the person everyone had to ask. I do not expect forgiveness. I only wanted you to know I finally understand you were never the weak one in this family. I read it 3 times, then put it in the drawer beside Rosalind's tapes, not because the two were equal, because both, finally, held some truth. Claire and I rebuilt slowly, starting with Wednesdays. She and Eli come to the woodshop after school. I'm teaching him the difference between a bearing and a bushing. We revised my estate plan with independent counsel. Claire inherits, but no single family member ever again controls another person's health or money without daylight on every decision. With help from Ridgeline's Trust Committee, I started a small fund that pays for free legal consultations for older adults facing suspicious guardianship petitions. Diane joined its board. Gerald refused a salary and only asked that meetings serve decent coffee. I fixed the roof in the spring. I paid the invoice myself and kept the receipt in my own file, the way a man does when he trusts his own hands again. Then I bought the boat. Nothing extravagant. A used 18-foot runabout with a dependable motor. I named it Roz's Argument. Claire laughed when she saw the lettering. She'd hate that, she said. She'd pretend to. I told her, 2 years after I walked into Ridgeline Trust asking for $4,000, Claire, Eli, and I took that boat out on Lake Chautauqua on a clear, cold morning, mist still sitting on the water. Eli held the fishing rod with fierce concentration. Grandpa, he said, Mom says you're rich. Claire nearly spilled her coffee. That's not exactly how I put it, I laughed. Something close to that. But probably not for the reason you think. He frowned. Do you still have all the money? Children ask the questions. Adults spend a lifetime dressing up in nicer clothes. Something like it, I said. And because it's a tool, Eli, the second you let it become the one giving the orders, it starts making terrible decisions for you. Claire looked out toward the shoreline. That sounds exactly like Grandpa. Most of my good ideas do, I said. His line jerked. He shouted and reeled in a fish barely longer than his hand, celebrating like he'd hauled up buried treasure. He wanted to keep it. I told him it was too small. But I caught it, he protested. That doesn't mean it belongs to you forever. He lowered it back into the water. Disappointed for exactly 3 seconds, and it flashed once beneath the surface and was gone. Claire rested her hand on my shoulder. For years I believed peace meant keeping a family together no matter the cost. A locked door. A quiet lie. Everyone agreed not to examine too closely. I know better now. Peace isn't a locked door. It's being able to sit inside your own life without asking anyone's permission first. I still love my son. Some mornings that feels like grief. Some evenings it feels almost like hope. Forgiveness, it turns out, was never a door I had to unlock before I was ready to walk through it. It was a road I could walk without carrying him on my back the entire way. Claire and I will never get those 8 lost years back. We can only refuse to lose the next 8. The money paid lawyers and restitution and a fund with my late wife's name quietly behind it. But the thing that mattered most was never on any ledger. It was my own voice, the same voice my son once described in a courtroom as confused, the same voice I'd silenced myself, for years, just to keep the peace in a house that was never really at peace at all. As we turned the boat back toward the dock, I thought about that first question in Diane Osie's office, the one that started all of it. Mr. Kessler, why are you asking us for $4,000? At the time, I believed I was only there to fix a well pump.